Okay, this is going to be one of a series of Last Jedi defenses. I'm going to use basically Mauler as a sounding board. I hope it doesn't come off I'm doing ad hominem, but as we're going to see, he makes some extraordinary claims that are really genuinely idiotic. So I want to get that out of the way because I have seen his videos a few times. He actually converted me to his position, but then I double-checked a lot of stuff. I've been very careful over the months, re-looking at stuff, and have to conclude a lot of the critique is not good. It's pointing some good plot holes here and there, but for the most part, it's not very strong. So in this one, we're going to do the first 31st minutes of Last Jedi critique, part 1. I'm going to skip over the first couple minutes. I do think he raises a lot of great questions, but I'm going to get straight to the bombing section and the issues with that. This is with Poe, the Dreadnought, and Paige. So without further ado, let's get going. I will take for granted this is spoiled, so, just that warning in mind. Okay, so Hux is talking to Poe. Poe does his jokes. And I agree with Mauler, like, why is Hux not firing? I also agree with his thematic point. Hux is coming off too stupid. Poe is going to move on with the fighter to knock out the cannons on the Dreadnought. Now, Mauler doesn't raise any initial problem. He says, we know he's the best pilot. He's citing TFA. I don't know why. He has an intercut thing with Anakin. I just have to say that's just stupid. Anakin is a wish fulfillment character. Poe, from what we understand, is an actual well-trained fighter. He earned being a pilot. Anakin is just a miracle pilot, so they're not equivalent. I don't understand why he's bringing in episode 1, but that was weird. Also, Oscar Isaac is an insanely good actor, so comparing him to Jake Lloyd just makes no sense. He also has this thing with Zorro he cuts in. I don't know why. Is it because Oscar is Hispanic? I don't know. I don't get it. Okay, so we're going to move on to the cannons and whether they're good offensive weapons. I'm going to immediately put this in the question mark column because I have to do more research here. But we're going to get into the issue he brings up that why aren't the cannons just much more effective, generally speaking? Right. Because the technology has moved on for like 40 years, but the cannons are still not very good at knocking down pilots. So what's going on here? Well, let me cite George Lucas. Star Wars, he says, came out of my desire to make a modern fairy tale. Now, I don't want to use this as an open call to excuse all problems, but I think what he's doing is trying to use Trek kind of knowledge and a Trek understanding of science fiction technology and just importing it to Star Wars. But Star Wars has never been Star Trek, so I don't see the issue here. It's not science fiction, it's a fairy tale. It's science fantasy at most. But he does point out a good point that Gareth Edwards has been a little bit stronger with the fighters. At least the Rogue One sequences he brings up do seem to be a little bit stronger. So I would concede that point. Then he talks about Leia saying, disengage your fleet. I'll just repeat that. Disengage your fleet, Poe. I'm not quite sure what the issue is here, because Poe's by himself, so is Leia just making a grammatical mistake? She should be using, singular instead of plural. I didn't quite catch what the big issue here is. But then he brings up the real problem here, which is Ryan's obsession with bomber imagery, which I agree with, but I don't think it emerges as a plot hole. He does raise a great point with the Raddus, like why doesn't the Dreadnought fire on the Raddus first, but not the base? I'm going to do a little separate thing on this because I think this is a good question, but I think that just assumes that the commander who is in charge of the bomber knows that the Raddus is where they're all fleeing to. That's a big assumption here. He's just begging the question. I'm not sure it is a fact that they know this for sure, but so I think that's a big question mark. He could be right. I mean, I definitely noticed that, and that's one of the great points he brings up in the videos, but it's like, is that really a strong point? But let me just note very quickly that the commander says that Poe is not trying to penetrate their armor. He's trying to knock out the cannons. Now we're going to get to the real substantive point, which is his just critique of the bombers in general. Like, why are the Resistance fighters, this is his quote, why are the Resistance using these ships instead of Y-Wings? That's a direct quote. The only argument I've heard is that the payload is capable of knocking out a Dreadnought, but a whole fleet of Y-Wings are not. Again, more direct quotes. Fabricated argument, the writers control whether this is possible, not the viewer. I want to say this is really stunning because for somebody who criticizes Game of Thrones, on precisely this basis, the writers are just making stuff up. Now he's saying what the problem here is the writers are making stuff up. That's a tautology. Writers make stuff up by definition. That's a really confusing quote. I don't quite understand what he's saying. And then he adds, there's never a line to say that these bombers are the only ones capable of this level of damage. Well, yeah, that's true, but that's meaningless. Right? I mean, are you pointing out that he has to say this explicitly? Well, let's say he did. I mean, let's say Ryan does have a throwaway line saying these bombers are capable of that. Would that defeat the argument? I mean, he has a lot of throwaway lines, and during the course of the critique, Mauler just dismisses it or he challenges it. So why would the throwaway line matter? It just seems he's pointing out a very moronic point. Well, if Ryan was being really detailed, he would say a throwaway line. David and Dan have a lot of throwaway lines in Game of Thrones. That doesn't mean their logic is invulnerable. So the throwaway line is just weird. But let's get to the more substantive point. At this level of damage, and even if they were, that would be an artificial inconvenience to allow the use of these ships. That's the bombers. The fact is Y-Wings have been used to destroy Star Destroyers. The Dreadnought does not have shields. I'm pretty sure the Y-Wings would be fine. The resistance using these ships is a plot hole. Okay, so that's the accusation. Well, factually, no. First of all, the Dreadnought does have shields. The commander talks about armor. He doesn't use the word shield. But looking this up at StarWars.com, yes, the Dreadnought does have shields. So let me repeat that. The Dreadnought does have shields. He also misspells the word Dreadnought, by the way, which is really embarrassing. So, no, he's just factually wrong. In terms of the canon, Dreadnoughts have shields. But the more substantive point, the Y-Wings would be as capable as the bombers. Well, again, looking it up, in terms of canon, the Y-Wings can carry bombs. However, they're vulnerable during dogfights. If they unleash TIE fighters, then many of the Y-Wings possibly could be destroyed. So, again, you're begging the question whether the Y-Wings really are superior. He's taking for granted the Y-Wings are radically better than the bomber. But he doesn't point to any evidence, so this is just a lot of rhetoric. But that's a plot hole, but it's not a plot hole, so, because the Dreadnought does have shields. Repeating it again. Why is this happening? Or why is this not happening? Direct quote. Because they don't need to, or the Y-Wings maybe are not radically better. Now, the other major controversy, which we'll get to, which is Paige and the bomber itself, which is, a lot of people have gone through this, like, when she opens the payload, why is she not suffocating? How are the bombs dropping? Da-da-da-da-da. Now, it's not just him, and I don't want to pick on Mauler. So many people have said this. Like, why do bombs drop when there is no gravity? Well, apparently he doesn't know physics. And let me be very clear. He admits to being a layman, so he doesn't really know physics. But he's using physics anyway. Well, looking up physics, there is gravity in space. Let me repeat. There is gravity in space, so there is no contradiction. They don't need magnets. They don't need anything. They're just fine. There's gravity in space, so there's no problem. But then he also asks, okay, fine. There's no real technical problem. But the issue here is, why is Paige being sacrificed? Why don't they just use a droid to unleash the bombs? The other issue is, well, why doesn't Ryan say explicitly there's a force field? Again, that just sounds silly. I mean, it really sounds silly. He recommends that a robot voice tell us, the audience, there is a force field. Why not have the robot voice also say, there is a space battle. This woman has on a spacesuit. This is a spaceship. You could have the computer voice saying, I am a computer voice too. Like, what? Those are really weird, bizarre criticisms. I have no idea what he's talking about. But let's get on to Paige's sacrifice. Now, he's not denying what the basic point is here, right? I mean, it's about heroic sacrifice and, us feeling something for the character. And this will be very, very important with Rose later, as well as Poe, that he's willing to sacrifice her. But again, I just don't see anything bad here. I mean, the only thing would be that he's lingering on the camera. He's spending a little too much time looking at Paige, and we're lingering on her sacrifice. Fine. But his basic point, these bombers are so badly designed. But it worked. The bomber destroyed the Dreadnought. The Dreadnought had huge shields. It would not work if they maybe used Y-Wings. So again, it seems like there's not a plot hole. It seems an issue over style, right? We'll just have the Y-Wings because they look good, but I don't see the substance here. I don't see a plot hole emerged at all. But he does raise a little bit of an issue later, and this is why we're getting to the 31 mark, because he's finished with the, the gravity thing and things like that. And he asks, because, Snoke has seen the Dreadnought being destroyed, And Snoke asks Hux, what is he doing in response? And Hux is panicking, says, oh, don't worry, we've got a tracker. And we're going to get into the tracker in another segment, but it's an interesting thing. He says, like, yeah, why does Snoke not know about the trackers? Why does he not keep up on FO technology? Now, this is a much bigger topic, but I think right away that's pretty obvious. Like, he's the head of the organization. He's not going to know about every single technological advance, even if it's critical to the war. This is going to be in the text. Kylo kills Snoke, but why? Because Snoke is arrogant. Snoke is not looking at what's going on in front of him. I mean, Hux does the same thing, but he's not as extreme. So in terms of, like, why doesn't Snoke know what's going on with the trackers? Yeah, he's very much aloof. He's very arrogant. I mean, the throne sequence does this directly. He says, I cannot be beaten. I cannot be betrayed. I cannot. You know, yeah, he's really stupid and arrogant. I mean, this isn't a new thing. This is a basic theme of Star Wars. In every single film, these authoritarian systems, whether it's the Jedi, the Sith, the First Order, the Empire, the Republic, they're very closed systems. They're not very good at gathering information. They're not very good at seeing what's in front of their face, right? The Jedi don't notice Palpatine is a Sith, and he's always interacting with them. So I think it's just a basic thematic point that, yeah, Snoke is like a lot of these leaders. He's really sort of cut off from real information. But I do actually agree with his more substantive point that, well, Hux, again, is being treated like a clown. He's being really turned into this punching bag for a bunch of bad jokes. So, again, overall, I agree with his basic points, but if the promise here is of finding insanely powerful plot holes, I don't see it. The biggest one I really see is the Raddus, and I'm going to deal with that later, but yeah, in terms of gravity, yeah, there's gravity in space. The Dreadnoughts have shields. Y-Wings would not magically solve the problem. Yeah, canon technology is weird, but that's just Star Wars. Star Wars is a fantasy. I've quoted George Lucas, and I'm conceding the point that Rogue One probably did a better job displaying the fighters. But I don't see a plot hole. I don't even see a plot contrivance. I just see Ryan making a weird visual, choice to favor the bombers because he wanted to have bombers in his film. And again, I agree. Like, you're sacrificing something dramatically just to get us to Paige and show us her sacrifice. But this is not a plot contradiction. It's not a plot hole. As far as I know, you haven't brought up anything in the canon or science that shows us, well, these bombers are just so radically stupid. No, you haven't shown us. And your argument for it, well, the writers can make up whatever they want, is like, okay, but that could be used as a defense, and it could be used against your Game of Thrones videos. So, yeah, at least the first 30 minutes is a little disappointing. The strongest thing is the Raddus. I'm going to deal with that later. So, okay, we've done the first 31 minutes with Mauler in terms of critique of Last Jedi. I think I've dealt with fairly in terms of direct quotes. I'm going to provide sources and everything. Maybe I ran through it a little too quickly, but I will be very methodic and go through almost every single argument he gives, and they're really bad. Yeah, he goes through the gravity thing quite a lot. He goes through every single gravity possibility, apparently not knowing how gravity works. So it's a little sad, and it has a big misspelling. Okay, this has been the first 30 minutes of responding to Last Jedi critiques using Mauler. Critique of Last Jedi, Part 1, first 31st minutes. Thank you for listening, Star Wars Analyzed. If you like content, please like or subscribe below. Thank you very much.